In this video, I'm going to address some of the outstanding issues related to the Lucy Letby case, many of which I'm often asked about. There are many odds and ends that have yet to be tied up, of course, the most obvious being Lucy still being in prison and when her exoneration will be. And it's impossible to completely tie up some of these loose ends, but I'm going to address everything that is possible for me to address in this video as a kind of update to the case. So first thing obviously I'm asked about a lot is my forthcoming book and whether I can kind of give an update on it. What I will say is that over the next 6 weeks, the book's going to be released on the 9th of July. You'll be seeing a lot of things happen. We're doing things in the background now. And those things will become apparent when they come into the public domain. I'm actually going to record the audiobook in the next couple of weeks, which is a new experience for me. I promised people I'd try and take a photograph of the recording studio, so I'll try and do that and put it in a message. From what I've seen of it, it looks very much like a recording studio for rock bands, but I will not be doing anything musical, unfortunately. I have no musical talent. So yeah, everything is progressing well. I'm really looking forward to people reading it. I've had feedback from some, and that's all been really positive. And there's a lot of things that are going to be announced in the next few weeks. And probably stuff will happen that I don't even know about yet. So I'm just trying to stay calm about the whole thing. Naturally, it's the most important thing I've ever done. It's probably be the most important thing I ever do. So I'm trying to do it as professionally as possible. And I'm looking forward to it being in the public domain. What is happening with the Thirlwall inquiry after the latest update? Well, this is the latest update from the Thirlwall inquiry. The inquiry can now give a further update regarding publication of the final report. The report will be published at the earliest practical date. However, that will not be until after the summer recess of Parliament. We will give further updates regarding publication in due course. So all I can do is give my opinion on the Thirlwall inquiry. I think it's extremely unlikely that we will see that report in the foreseeable future, and I think it's quite likely we will never see that report. I think it's clear that Lady Thirlwall and probably those that are working behind the scenes on the Thirlwall inquiry, I don't know of the names of those people. Of course, there are some lawyers that I know about. When you send a letter to the Thirlwall inquiry, various people write back. I haven't done that, but I've seen other people write letters to them, and I've seen responses. I don't know what kind of high-level people are involved with the Thirlwall inquiry apart from Lady Thirlwall, but I think it's very clear that there can be no other reason for the delay. No, I can't think of any conceivable, reasonable justification for this level of delay other than they recognise politically they cannot release the speech. From day one of this inquiry, it was all directed towards this narrative that, insipid bureaucrats at the hospital stopped the brave consultants from preventing Lucy Letby from wreaking havoc more quickly. And therefore, what we should do is give the police more power, essentially, and order hospitals to refer cases to the police more quickly if there's a spike in deaths. Now, obviously, if they were to put that narrative forward and put such recommendations related to that forward now, not only would that be dangerous, but also the level of media condemnation that they would receive would be enormous. And obviously they will want to avoid that. So I think their only feasible approach is to just delay until the case is referred to the Court of Appeal and then say, we can't do anything now, and try to deal with the fallout one day that will happen from the fact that there will need to be an inquiry into the inquiry, which is not an ideal situation, obviously. But I think I know for a fact that this report was supposed to be written and revealed in 6 months, which would have meant it was released in September last year. And it's now May this year, and we're not going to get it until autumn this year, so it'll be nearly a year delay. A year delay for something that takes 6 months is incomprehensible, indefensible under normal circumstances. In these circumstances, it's not indefensible because they know politically, it's very difficult to release it. So this is a prediction. It's a prediction that can be wrong, but I just don't think we'll see that report. I don't think we'll ever see it, and I definitely don't think we'll see it this year or before the case is referred to the Court of Appeal. And then I think when it's referred to the Court of Appeal, that will be a convenient get-out clause for them to have to release this report that has recommendations that are based on terms of reference that just simply make no sense. Why is the response to Lucy's appeal taking so long? So I've got on the screen here some examples of CCRC referrals that took a very long time. There are various reasons for these things. Obviously, you've seen recently Peter Sullivan was eventually exonerated, having been in prison for 38 years. In the Colin Campbell case, where he wasn't exonerated, he lost his appeal. That appeal took 13 to 14 years to be heard, and then, in my opinion, the defence made terrible mistakes. We've had Michael O'Brien on the channel, who was in prison for 11 years while innocent. Tom Hayes has been on the channel as well, another very high-profile case, and that was, I believe, was it 6 years or 7 years? And you can see here there's multiple cases that took a very long time. So this is just the pace that the criminal justice system moves at. It moves at glacial pace. It moves in a manner akin to tectonic plates. It does not move quickly. And actually, the fact that they're seemingly, it would appear, prioritising Lucy's case gives her a better chance of being heard more quickly. And I must say that I was told ages ago, last year at some point, and I think it was in the middle of last year. I can't remember exactly when, but it was quite some time ago now. I was told Lucy's case won't be referred to the Court of Appeal until well into 2026 and possibly towards the end of 2026. And I still think, I know there's this Dame Vera Baird's tenure ends on the 6th of December. And I think most of us that have observed the case in some detail believe that she doesn't want to leave with this case outstanding. So we can hope, I think, with some justification, that the case could be referred by December. And I know that might seem a long time, and I know it might seem unfair, but we have to be in this for the long haul, and we have to be patient, and we have to keep the pressure up and not allow our spirits to be diminished in any way, because Lucy needs support from the public and support from people that care about the case. And I know that there's a responsibility on me to remain involved indefinitely, which I will. I don't want to be working on this 10 years from now, from a personal perspective. And obviously, more importantly, I don't want Lucy to be in prison 10 years from now. But if that's what it takes, that's what I'll have to do. Obviously, that would be calamitous, because then her life would have been completely destroyed. But she'd just have to come out of prison and do the best that she can with the years she had left. Let's not think about that scenario too much, but I just want people to understand that they may need to be patient for a certain period of time. It may still be years until Lucy is exonerated. Hopefully not 10 years, hopefully not even 5 years, but it's not going to happen quickly for numerous reasons. And that's partly a reflection of the criminal justice system. It's partly a reflection of the complexity of the case. It's partly a reflection of the consequences of Lucy being exonerated, as she obviously should be. But it's still a big decision to make, and it won't be one that's made really, really quickly. What I will say is Lucy's in a better position than anyone else that's ever been in her circumstances in British history, both in terms of the amount of support, the amount of public pressure, and the focus on her case. And as I said previously in a previous live stream, I do believe, absolutely, I'm 100% certain she'll be exonerated. It is just a time frame, and it obviously needs to be while she's still in her 30s and can have something to look forward to, and can hopefully overcome the enormous psychological toll that this will have taken on her. So then a related question is, what impact will the new CCR commissioners have on the process? So for those who don't know, there have been new commissioners appointed to the Criminal Cases Review Commission, and there are 6 new commissioners. It does seem always very strange to me when it says His Majesty the King, on the recommendation of the Prime Minister, has approved the appointment of 6 commissioners to the Criminal Cases Review Commission. It just seems so antiquated to me, but there you go. The two particularly relevant ones, I think, are Andrew Hoyle, dual qualified as a registered doctor and a practicing barrister, so a very qualified gentleman. And then James Lucas, a registered medical practitioner and previously practiced an expert witness in the criminal justice system. It seems to me that they're very likely to be assigned to Lucy's case. Some of the others seemed less... It seemed that their specialist areas were less obviously related to Lucy's case, but I'm sure that these gentlemen will be assigned to Lucy's case. And, obviously I need to engage in a degree of speculation here. I don't know what influence this will have on Lucy's case, but it would seem to indicate, based on what we can reasonably infer, that this is positive because it means they're taking it seriously and they're trying to advance it quickly. But we would expect that anyway. So I don't know that this will have an enormous impact, really, because I think whatever happens, the CCRC will refer the case because they're going to come under if they said there's not enough evidence to refer the case to the Court of Appeal, can you imagine the backlash that they would have at this point in time? What they're doing, in my estimation, is getting their ducks in a row and making sure that when they make the submission to the Court of Appeal, it's of the highest quality and calibre to give the Court of Appeal the best chance to hear it. And I'm not saying that to defend the system. I've not been a big defender of the system, as you've probably noticed, but it is important that it's referred in the right way and is a serious matter. And although obviously I don't believe this in Lucy's case, the fact is someone could be guilty of murder, they could launch a frivolous appeal, and that appeal needs to be, addressed and assessed in the right way, because you don't want to allow someone to come out of prison who's guilty, of course. Even though, as I discussed with Ollie some time ago, that in any criminal justice system, there are going to be situations in which innocent people go to prison and in which guilty people go free. That's just a fact of life. You can't have a perfect system. The appeal system must be made more robust so that its modus operandi is not defending the system, but defending injustice. And correcting injustice. And obviously I feel that's not the case at the moment. So I guess in conclusion, I could give a very short answer saying I don't know what influence it will have. And I don't think anyone could say for certain. But I think it's reasonable to infer that it will have some significant influence on the process. And I think it indicates that they want the timescale of this to be competitive compared to previous referrals to Court of Appeal, and I think it also indicates they want the calibre of that referral to be as strong as possible. Is there any update on the investigation into Dr. Ravi Jayaram? So I'll read you the tweet that I wrote quite recently. Today is the 1-year anniversary of David Davis writing to Cheshire Police requesting an investigation into Dr. Ravi Jayaram. This was first reported here. I'm not going to reiterate the issues with Jayaram's court testimony. This has been authoritatively established in this Unheard article. We were informed at the time that the Chief Constable has received the letter. This has been reviewed and he will be responding in due course, addressing all the concerns raised. I accept that in due course references an indeterminate period of time. It does, however, typically imply that there will be a relatively prompt response. It is notable that when Sir David spoke in Parliament on the many obvious blunders inherent in Operation Hummingbird, the response from the Chief Constable of Cheshire Police, while execrable in quality, was considerably more swift. I accept that an investigation into Jayaram's comments would take longer, but this is a relatively straightforward matter. It does not require a complex investigation. We have already reasonably traversed beyond the point where due course has elapsed. Will we ever hear any more about this? So I think I addressed the issue reasonably well there, and of course the answer to the question is we haven't heard a single peep out of Cheshire Police regarding Dr. Ravi Jayaram, and I suspect that we never will until this whole thing unravels. Is there any update on the executives from the hospital being arrested? So just to remind people about this, 3 executives from the Council of Chester Hospital, and we believe that we know the identity of those executives, although they've never been confirmed, were arrested. It would have been a couple of years ago now. It's quite a while ago now. And then recently, what you see on the screen now occurred. One of the three was then arrested again. I'll just read about this. A senior healthcare boss who worked at the hospital where nurse Lucy Letby murdered 7 babies has been arrested on suspicion of perverting the course of justice. And very, very few details have been given, except there was a search of a property, and it's one of the 3 hospital bosses that was arrested and bailed in 2025 on suspicion of gross negligence manslaughter. So all I can say about this is a lot of people ask me about this as if I know more than you. I don't know anything about this whatsoever. This new arrest with regard to perverting the course of justice, I know nothing about it whatsoever other than what is written in this news article, and I cannot comment on that because it could be they found something legitimate. I don't know. It's impossible for me to say. And as they've revealed no information, which would be normal if it's an ongoing investigation, then I can't comment on that at all. As I've said numerous times, with regard to arresting the executives and saying that they should have done more at the hospital, I don't know how they can possibly be charged on that basis, because it's well documented that the case was referred to Cheshire Police with no evidence of any wrongdoing. And Cheshire Police agreed with this, and Cheshire Police wrote this in their own documents. So how the hospital bosses could have referred the case to the police more quickly on that basis, I have no idea. And what they could have done differently, I have no idea. And how that could possibly go to court, I cannot imagine how it could occur. With that being said, I don't know anything further than that. They haven't. I don't know at what point a police constabulary would say we're not pursuing this any further. If it's a high-profile case, I don't think they ever will with this, but sometimes it takes a case a long time to go to court, and sometimes it doesn't go to court at all after a long investigation. So I don't know at what point they say, right, that's it, we've closed the case, or if they do that at all. It's not like most people are sitting on the edge of the seat waiting for police announcements regarding some investigation they've done. They're living their lives, so obviously it's important for the police, but whether they actually release statements or not, I don't know. But all we can say is that their investigations are ongoing. We know very little information about it, and I don't know when we will know any more. Has there been any reaction from Cheshire Police to the comments that Sir David Davis made in response to Mark Roberts? Well, here is the correspondence of Sir David Davis to Mark Roberts, not the whole letter, I won't go through that again, I've been through it on the channel previously. Just to remind you, Sir David Davis spoke in Parliament on the Cheshire Police investigation of Lucy Letby. Mark Roberts, the Chief Constable of Cheshire Police, wrote a response. I think that was a very ill-advised response in many ways, and then essentially David Davis annihilated him in this letter. Surprisingly, we've not heard from Mr. Roberts, or indeed anyone from Cheshire Police since then, although I think this arrest came after. I can't remember. I'm pretty sure it came after this, but they haven't responded to any further criticism of their investigation, and criticism of their criticism of David Davis, which made some fairly astounding comments were made that David Davis should apologise in Parliament. Now, I know for a fact that the speech he made was very thoroughly researched, and I've fact-checked it on this channel, so we know that everything he said was correct. So it was very ill-advised of Mark Roberts to respond at all. And if he was going to respond, it should have been in a more mild fashion. So having been essentially slapped down by this letter, I don't think we're going to be hearing any more on this topic for quite some time. I have made complaints regarding Cheshire Police and have received minimal response. Will this ever be addressed? So I've encountered a few people who've written to the Independent Office for Police Conduct. I suppose I could give a very long answer to this question, or I could give a very short answer. I'm not optimistic that the investigation of Cheshire Police would ever be placed under the microscope in any significant way until Lucy was exonerated. I just don't have any faith in organisations or institutions or bodies such as the IOPC. I've had no personal dealings with them, so I've got nothing against them personally, but I just don't believe in the system. I don't have faith in the system. broadly speaking. I try to retain an open mind. I try to be fair-minded. Where good things happen, I try to acknowledge this, but ultimately I don't think the IOPC are going to have any desire to investigate Cheshire Police unless there is extremely strong evidence of wrongdoing, and that would mean unlawful acts, which they definitely did not engage in unlawful acts. So I understand why people want to explore this avenue and feel that it's legitimate, and I'm not here to poo-poo that, but unfortunately it will probably just be a wasted letter. However, if people wish to do that and think that it's a worthwhile thing to do and they don't mind investing the time, then it does get the complaint on the record now, and it does get the issue on the record now, and in the future, when this all unravels, which we hope is sooner rather than later, that may then become relevant in terms of the IOPC or any other body significantly, let alone thoroughly, investigating Cheshire Police and their conduct, or whether they it's very clear they didn't do the right things. That's not really open to debate. But the IOPC, I've seen responses from people, and they typically say, "You're not an affected party." So, I've seen various things. The letters all have slightly different wording, slightly different arguments, but it's all basically dead bat, dead bat, dead bat. We're not going to say anything about this. We're not going to treat this with any real seriousness. I'm sure they would say otherwise. I'm sure they'd say, "Oh, we are treating it with seriousness. We're just doing what we're entitled to do under the legislation, and we're behaving in the right way." And I'm sure that's true. All I can say is that I'm not really optimistic about the potential for the IOPC to do anything, or indeed anyone else until this is settled. But please don't let that discourage you from registering your feelings and views, but just don't expect anything positive to come of it in terms of actual action, I would say. Is there any prospect of more MPs getting involved in Lucy's case? Well, obviously I don't work in Westminster and I don't live in London, and I'm not close to the political process in any way. So I can only give you my opinion based on my perspective, which is not necessarily an informed perspective. I think that there will be a reluctance from MPs to get involved in something so controversial that involves the legal system until such time as they are certain that it's the right thing to do, essentially. So if you had overwhelming evidence that Lucy Letby was not just innocent, but that she was going to be exonerated, or that the system had completely failed, then I think at that point you may get more MPs coming out. I think it's very difficult for non-senior MPs. For a start, it's difficult for anyone in a front bench position to intervene, because technically they're supposed to the political process and the court system are supposed to remain independent, and there's very good reasons for that. In reality, they don't at all, but they're supposed to remain independent, completely independent, and certainly the government's never supposed to intervene in the courts or intervene in court decisions, in any way. So in that respect, it's difficult for front benchers. It would be more of a backbench response, but then unless you're a senior backbencher who's been around for a long time, I think there will be significant pressure on you not to say anything. I don't know if you'd have the whip taken away. Just for people that don't know, the whip gives you your right to be part of a political party and speak in Parliament. Like I'm not going to go over. I'm not an expert on the whip. It's just if you take the whip away, you have no. Your position as MP is untenable, basically. Someone else will give you a much better explanation of what the whip is, but I don't know whether the whip could be taken away because you spoke out and said, "I'm worried about this conviction." I don't think that it would be, because there have been other MPs who have spoken in David Davis's events. But it could be held against you. Your party can remove that fundamental aspect of being an MP, and I don't know. But I think it's something that MPs would be very cautious about, because they would realise there could be consequences. And I think that's why you've seen two very senior, very established, knighted MPs speak out in Jeremy Hunt and David Davis. I'm certain, I can't prove this, but I'm certain that the private position of MPs, many MPs, may be very different from their public position. And I'm sure I know for a fact because I've seen a few letters, MPs are starting to do something, they're starting to acknowledge it, and they're aware of the issue. Obviously, they're not ready to speak out yet. We don't know if that will happen. It may not happen until after Lucy's exonerated. But I think what you see as the public position of MPs and what they say privately may be very different. Could Andy Burnham becoming Prime Minister help Lucy's cause? Well, this is another area where I don't have any particularly specialist insight. I don't know Andy Burnham. Obviously, I haven't closely followed his career. I'm aware of what he's done. I'm broadly aware of his political perspective and positions. And it seems fairly likely to me that he's going to become the Prime Minister. Because now, I thought this was going to blow over when West Streeting stepped down because I thought Starmer would survive. But now, if Andy Burnham does win this by-election, then it seems likely that he will launch a leadership bid, and it seems likely he'll have enough support, adequate support, to be able to have a leadership contest. And I think if there's a leadership contest, he will win, because I think the Labour Party will recognise that Starmer is very likely to lose the next election, or at least they won't be the majority part. They won't have the majority of seats. They won't be the party with the most seats. They possibly could enter into coalition government, but I think as things stand now, even the bookmakers say it's likely Reform will have the most seats. So I think Labour MPs will recognise that if some of them don't have particularly safe seats, then Labour gained a lot of marginal seats at the last election. So I think a lot of MPs will recognise, if I want to keep my job, if I want to carry on doing this, a change of leadership is necessary. So that's discussing the political situation. In terms of how it would affect Lucy, I'm not particularly optimistic that Andy Burnham will do anything. He hasn't made any public comments about this. I'm not terribly optimistic, broadly speaking, about politics anyway. But there are three other reasons why I'm not enormously hopeful that he would say or do anything. The first one is that he'd be doing something very controversial immediately after becoming the leader of the party. Now, I suppose that it doesn't have to be immediately. It could be 12 months down the line or 18 months down the line, but it would still be relatively early into his tenure. And whether he'd want to wade in on such a contentious subject matter that typically the government and really any political party at the highest levels, the front bench levels, is not supposed to really interfere with. Whether he would want to do that, I would be very doubtful about. The second reason is it's not like a stated political aim of Andy Burnham, as far as I'm aware. I've not heard him really talk about law and order. He's more focused on socioeconomic issues, and crime is very much related to socioeconomic issues, but this crime is not related to socioeconomic issues at all, this alleged crime. I've not really seen any evidence that the justice system is high on his list of priorities or anywhere on his list of priorities. And then the third reason is very much related to that, which is when he comes in, his job will be to kind of deliver traditional left-leaning Labour policies and shore up his core following, essentially. And that doesn't really necessarily include miscarriages of justice, which most people, sadly, and I don't say this critically because this applied to me as well until recently, most people are quite complacent about the criminal justice system and they don't understand how bad it is. I had no idea the problems that were inherent in this system until I started to study this case, and I'm thankful that I have a better impression now of what things are like. But most people don't, and I don't see this being a priority for Andy Burnham. With that being said, I think it's better to have him in place than Keir Starmer, and it's infinitely better than Wes Streeting. I mean, Wes Streeting, there was a comment I read out the other day, didn't I? I think from from Peter Hitchens, where basically what he said was, I've never heard Wes Streeting say anything even remotely insightful about anything, and I'm not really sure why anyone would support him in any capacity. And he said some fairly guileless things about Lucy's case. Was this motivated by the fact the NHS has been delivering poor care on his watch? I don't know whether that's true or not, but he would be the worst appointment, but I don't see him winning. I don't think he's got a chance. So I suppose out of the three, Andy Burnham would give room for the most optimism, but I consider it to be a very small amount of optimism. Are there any other avenues for Lucy's appeal, such as the Supreme Court, European Court of Human Rights, or even a charity such as Appeal? So let's take those one by one. First of all, this is where the European Court of Human Rights is assembled. Pretty ugly building, if you ask me. Now, there could conceivably be a point in the future where the European Court of Human Rights could get involved, but let's be clear, that would take an enormously long period of time. It wouldn't really help Lucy at this point in time. If you went to the European Court of Human Rights, you'd need to have a very good reason why Lucy's human rights had been trampled upon in some way, and I don't think that they would accept that. I think they would simply say she had a fair trial in a democratic country. Thanks for your referral, but you need to deal with your domestic court system. Plus, of course, we're not part of the European Commission anymore, which can make a difference. I don't really know all the political aspects of that, but I'll come back to that in a second. The second one's the Supreme Court. Typically, much nicer building the Supreme Court has, in my view. But the Supreme Court typically presides over cases where there has been a procedural error or massive procedural problems. And I don't think Lucy's case could be referred to the Supreme Court because typically they don't rule over such cases. There hasn't been procedural errors in Lucy's case. There's been things that we disagree with that have occurred in court, but they're not necessarily procedural errors with the way that the law stands at this point in time. So I don't necessarily see this as a viable avenue, unfortunately. With regard to Appeal, I don't know too much about this. And I respect what they do. All I would say to you is the idea that a charity is going to come along and overturn this conviction is not really tenable to me, because this is a very serious business. It's a very serious conviction. It's a very prominent court case. And I think the only way it's going to be overturned is via the avenues that have been put in place now, which is the CCRC and the Court of Appeal. As much as we may be critical of them, as much as that criticism may be justified, I think it's the only way. At one time, I was hoping that there could be a government intervention. There are avenues that make this possible, but when I further investigate these avenues, they take an enormously long period of time and are very unlikely to happen. So I know people are just looking for ways to help Lucy, and can we investigate another avenue? Is there any other way that she can get out? I don't see it. I only see her getting out through the court system, through the appeal system. And that's tough because they don't let a lot of people out, and they make it as difficult as possible, and they shore up the system, and we know the appeal system's not fit for purpose. We know the CCRC is not fit for purpose. The CCRC has made, I think, quite visible efforts to improve what they're doing, and they should be credited for that. I know people are frustrated the case hasn't been referred yet, but they have tried to address the rightful criticisms of the body and organisation, and hopefully that will help. Obviously, I still have concerns about the Court of Appeal, but whatever we may think, I feel that's Lucy's only realistic port of call, unfortunately. Is there any update on the case involving a nurse in Birmingham? Well, I'll just explain what this is about. So, there was a nurse arrested from Birmingham Children's Hospital following a death on the unit. And then they arrested her again with regard to 3 other apparent deaths or sudden deteriorations. and they released her and said she remains under investigation, and we've never heard anything since. And I think the explanation for that is quite simple, and I'm overwhelmingly confident that this is correct, although I can't be 100% certain. I think they were going to employ a very similar methodology to the Lucy Letby case. I suspect the allegations are very similar. I suspect it was, oh, there's been a death, we weren't expecting it, then there's been a few collapses. Oh, we don't like the look of these figures. Which nurse was around? Oh, this nurse was around quite a bit. And then she's been arrested, and they've started looking. It's one poisoning, so if they had concrete evidence, they could have charged her immediately. Then there's more cases that are coming up. It's going to be exactly the same thing as this case, I can guarantee you. And they've obviously looked more widely at more cases in Birmingham to try and find more cases to pin on her. And then they found a few more, and then they call her in. And we've always seen what it's like when they call Lucy in. You can imagine can you tell us what happened when child A collapsed? Well, this happened and that happened. Did you kill her? No. That's what it'll be like. And obviously, I think the reason that they've stopped their investigation is they know, wow, we better be bloody careful here, considering what's happening with Lucy's case. So this will probably never advance now. Obviously it's not impossible that she's guilty, but if they had decent evidence, they would have charged her. If they had anything approaching concrete evidence or strong circumstantial evidence, she would have been charged, and rightly so. They obviously don't have that because she hasn't been charged. So it'll be probably maybe even be weaker than Lucy's case. This could be even weaker evidence than Lucy's case for all we know. And now they will have observed the Crown Prosecution Service turning away these other cases related to Lucy from Liverpool Women's Hospital and also from the Council of Chester. So they'll know if we don't get our shit together, this is going to be quite embarrassing because we'll get these cases rejected. And we've already pulled this nurse out of her job and basically ruined her life. So we don't want to make ourselves look even more stupid than we probably have already. So no, there is no update on this case, and I don't think we'll ever hear about it again. Unfortunately, this nurse, who is probably innocent, we can't say with absolute certainty, but I'd say very confidently that she will be, because if they had good evidence against her, she already would have been charged. Now, we may hear in the next couple of months, couple of years, who knows, a nurse has been charged that relate to Birmingham Women's and Children's NHS Foundation Trust, but I seriously doubt that, because she was arrested 4 years ago now. I mean, how long does it take? I know there's some long police investigations that go on. We know Lucy's took 5 years, but this one has taken 4 years and counting, and they've not even, after 3 years of investigating the Council of Chester, supposedly, although they never actually investigated the hospital, they denied Lucy bail and started preparing the case for court. This has been going on for over 4 years. They've not even got to that stage yet. So I think the chance of this ever seeing a courtroom is about the same as an elephant passing through the eye of a needle. So there's a couple of personal questions for me here that I'm often asked. The first one is, have you had any contact with Lucy or Lucy's parents? So the answer to that question is no, but I will write to Lucy's parents soon when I get a chance. I should have done it by now, but I haven't had time. I've actually written the letter, but I haven't sent it. I think that would be the courteous thing to do, seeing as, again, their daughter is going to be in the news. That's really my main reason for writing to them. They don't need to have any contact with me, or I don't require any acknowledgement or anything like that. I just think it's courteous for me to do that. I've not had any contact with Lucy. I've not attempted any contact with Lucy. I don't think it's necessarily appropriate for me to do that. So there's not a lot else to say about that, really. I will send Lucy's parents a copy of my book, and it's very likely I'd send Lucy a copy, but if you want to send her one, then please do. But beyond that, it's not really appropriate for me to have a relationship with them, It would always be professional, just professional courtesy, really. Do you know how Lucy's coping in prison? So I don't know any more than anyone else. All I do know is that reports indicate that she's acclimatizing. The letter that was shared in the Netflix documentary indicated that Lucy is coping as well as can be expected, and she's trying to look on the positive. And that letter gave me enormous hope that she can come out of prison and recover and lead a normal life and find purpose and find happiness, which is what any right-thinking person would want for her. And obviously there's been reports that she's working in the library, which kind of makes me think of the Shawshank Redemption, because that's what the kind of protagonist does in that film. I'm sure it's not as romantic as it's kind of depicted in the Shawshank Redemption, but she's nevertheless finding a role within prison, and her mental state has been reported by Mark McDonald to be better than it was. But he's also said, I've not seen her really happy, which you wouldn't really expect to see her really happy, would you? She must be suffering psychologically and mentally, but ultimately I only know what I've pieced together from various things that I've heard. And to be perfectly honest, if I did know more than that, I couldn't really tell you anyway, because it wouldn't be appropriate. But I genuinely don't know any more than that. That's all I know. And finally, and most importantly, what is a likely time frame for Lucy's exoneration and release? So I've mapped out what I believe to be several viable and even likely scenarios. So we begin here in 2026, the present day, where Lucy's case continues to progress through the legal system. So the first scenario, I must say, is extremely unlikely, which is that Dr. Evans withdraws his evidence, or one of the other main prosecution representatives does something similar. If this happened, particularly with the expert witnesses, there'd be increasing public and political pressure, and this would be very likely to cause the case to collapse. In this scenario, Lucy could be exonerated this year. She could be exonerated tomorrow. Obviously, it'd take a certain amount of time. Who knows what would happen exactly? I must say that this is very unlikely. I think it's 0.1%, less than 0.1% likelihood. So I wouldn't hold out too much hope of that, but it's not completely inconceivable. The second scenario, which is far more plausible, but still optimistic, would be for the case to be referred to the Court of Appeal this year. It's then heard rapidly by the Court of Appeal, and the Court of Appeal quashes the conviction. This would see Lucy released next year at some point. That is definitely possible, but it still requires a degree of optimism, and I don't necessarily think it's the most likely scenario. So scenario 3 is very similar, with the case being referred to the Court of Appeal, being heard by the Court of Appeal, but taking longer, and then the Court of Appeal quashes the conviction. This could take between a year and 4 years, estimated here. So a potential release date could be 2027 to 2030. A fourth potential scenario is that the Court of Appeal orders a retrial. So in this scenario 4 that I'm on here, this can all happen quickly. But then the retrial could collapse before the case goes to court, and the CPS could say, well, we don't wish to contest the case ultimately. So that could take anything from a year to 3 years, I think. I think that's if the appeal is heard rapidly. If the appeal is not heard rapidly, that's scenario 5. Again, the retrial collapses before the case goes to court, then it can drag on longer. It can drag on more years. Maybe 5 years from now is a reasonable estimate. And then the sixth scenario would be the case is referred to the Court of Appeal, the Court of Appeal orders a retrial, and the retrial actually takes place. So that could be anything from, I can't see that it could happen as early as next year. It's not impossible. But I think the earliest feasible date would be 2028, and it could actually drag on for years depending on all of the various factors, how long it takes for the CCRC to refer, how long it takes the Court of Appeal to make a decision, how long it takes the retrial to be put together, how long it takes the retrial to occur. But then you'd see a potential release date of 2028 to 2032. Scenario 7 is a very pessimistic scenario. The Court of Appeal refuses to overturn the conviction or order a retrial. In those circumstances, I want to assure people that I will remain involved and I'll keep fighting for Lucy for as long as is required and keep fighting for truth and justice, as importantly. But obviously, her release date and exoneration date would be unknown in that scenario. And then scenario 8 is probably the worst scenario. I don't think this one is very likely, but that would be that there is a retrial and Lucy's found guilty on at least one count, in which case the conviction would stand and a potential release date would be very much unknown. It's debatable whether Lucy would ever be released from prison under those circumstances. So I don't think that's likely. I think scenario 7 is more possible, where the Court of Appeal refuses to overturn the conviction or order a retrial. However, I think that's becoming less and less likely due to the understanding that this is an unsafe conviction, due to the calibre of people involved, due to the number of people, due to the amount of evidence, and of course, critically, the public pressure. So I think somewhere between scenario 2 and scenario 6 is the most likely. I don't think scenario 1 will happen. So you're looking at anything from 2027 to 2032. I think 2027 would be enormously optimistic and probably won't happen, but it's possible. And I think 2032 would be pessimistic and it probably won't drag on that long. I think it's more likely to be somewhere around 2028, 2029, maybe dragging into 2030. But I do think if I had to, if it's a spread betting, fairly tasteless thing to do spread betting on, obviously, but I would say 2028, 2029 would be where I'd set the spread. But I can be wrong, of course. No one really knows. No one knows what's going to happen, but these are all the possible scenarios as I see it and the timeframes involved. So that means we need to keep going for Lucy for at least a few years, and I will do everything I possibly can, as I'm sure all of you will, and we just need to stay focused and stay involved and keep trying to do anything we possibly can to help, keep doing anything we possibly can to raise the profile of the case, to raise public awareness, to keep it in the news. All of these things are important. So I've kind of tried to tie up all the odds and ends there. Obviously some of them remain undecided, but I've done the best that I can to give you an answer to all of the kind of compelling questions regarding what's going to happen next in the future. The only thing I suppose I haven't addressed is what will happen when Lucy is released and exonerated. But I think I may look at that in a future video, as it's an interesting topic, as there will be a lot of consequences. But that's all for this video, so if you have any comments, queries, etc., please do leave them in the comment section. Thank you for the support as always, and I look forward to reading them.